myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and on Thursday I'm always joined by two legends, Malcolm MacDonald and John Gibson. Good evening, guys.
Good evening, Steve. Hi, John.
Good to see you guys. Good to see you. I wish it was a happier occasion, but another defeat by Steve Bruce's Newcastle United means that we're still in the midst of a relegation battle and out of all cups and nothing to really look forward to. A takeover which is just taken the proverbial. And look, nothing great to talk about. So I'm sure the guys out there will have a lot of questions. We'll come to them in due course. But let's just look at the fallout, Malcolm, of that Arsenal game. We saw two different Newcastle Uniteds turn up against the same Arsenal team, more or less, give or take a player or two. 8 changes, Malcolm, to that Premier League lineup. And the gloves were off. There was a lot of fighting talk from Steve Bruce. There was a few expletives at the press conference. But we saw what it meant to have the gloves off under Steve Bruce, and it wasn't very pretty.
No, it certainly wasn't. What it looked like to me, what we're doing here is NUFC Matters. What the players did against Arsenal was NUFC doesn't matter. It was absolutely shocking. It couldn't have been much worse if Steve Bruce had gone out onto the street and just shouted, if there are 11 footballers around, 10, because I'm not going to include Darlow in this. There are one or two others that I'm being a bit cruel on as well. Clark, for example. But I really don't understand what he's been saying in terms of being a football manager. You manage and you don't allow players to dictate, because that will get you the sack. It always does. And he is admitting that he's allowed players to dictate, to pick the team, to pick the tactics, and so on and so forth. And then he decides to take control and makes a complete and utter hash of it. And I really do feel that if the owner doesn't get this resolved before the end of this month, we're going to find ourselves in that same situation where Alan Shearer came in for the last 5 games. That is not good enough. Even 2 months is leaving it way too short. If action is going to be taken for the Premier League's safety and security of Newcastle United, it's got to take place in this month before it's out. And it's up to Mike Ashley if he wants to have a club in the Premier League, and if he's looking to get this sale happening, he needs to be in the Premier League. Otherwise, if Newcastle are relegated, their value will absolutely plummet to less than 50% of what it is now.
Yeah, John, it was fighting talk, as I've already said, from Steve Bruce. We've said on this show many times that, we get a bit embarrassed. It's a little bit cringeworthy at times from Steve Bruce. Just the way that he goes on, and that really was his worst moment yet for me, that press conference where he started swearing, and we don't need to hear that from a man sitting in the hot seat at St James's Park. We saw it with Joe Kinnear. It was targeted abuse at a journalist that time. This was a rallying cry. I get it that there's frustration, but it just wasn't the right way to do it, and he laid himself wide open for criticism by saying the gloves were off.
Sorry, John.
Yeah,
but just what you say about rally cry.
Yeah,
that's supposed to lift everybody. What it did was flatten them.
Yeah.
So it was complete opposite to a rally cry. That's what it turned out to be. Sorry,
yeah.
John.
Yeah, go on,
it's
John.
okay,
What was your feeling on that?
Well, for a start, don't feed the press of what Jam won with lines, coming out and say, I'll do it my way. You've got Frank Sinatra, you've got everything piling in on the back of this. It's just handing everybody the ammunition to say, are you mad? Are you daft? My way, by the way, the changing of the thing resulted in one shot on target from Newcastle United, 34% possession, and a 3-0 defeat. Well, if that's Steve Bruce's way, it's not the way we want to see Newcastle United operating. And from my point of view, the team selection as well left us with 8 outfield players, only 8 outfield players to try to compete physically with the Arsenal kids who swarm all over you in their youthful exuberance. We only had 8 outfield players to combat that because Shelby and Carroll don't get round the pitch. And if you've got a load of Arsenal kids running all over the shop, when we haven't got the ball, you can't compete with that, with Shelby and Carroll both in the side. And if you go going to play Carroll, and you don't have people out wide to cross the ball, which is his strength. I mean, Joe Linton on one side is as good as a left winger as he is as a centre forward. He is not capable at all of crossing the ball. You want Matt Ritchie in there who can get it one touch and whip in across. On the other side, Almiron, full of admiration for the effort he put in at Arsenal, and he's so willing. It's very tempting to look, which is obviously what Bruce does, at the fact that he, even though it's not part of his game, he'll work back and try to get in tackles. He'll then run forward from very, very deep positions with the ball and carry it up the field. But he's not a natural wide man who stays wide, looks up, one touch and a crossing for the two big men, Wilson and Carroll, who are no slouches in the air. He will tend to cut in from the wing and narrow the whole pitch and try to get the ball onto his left foot. I mean, I think he's a number 10. He's not a winger. And, consequent. And by the way, talking of Shelby, who is in that side, they can't get round the pitch. His strength is supposed to be his passing range, yet we get 2 corners, of which we've got very few, and you bring all the big men up from the back, your centre halves, etc., all trundling up into the penalty area, and then your corner kick doesn't clear the first man, and you're the best deliverer in the club, supposedly. I mean, it's criminal to bring all those guys up, and then you can't clear the first man. And he did it on the first 2 corners that he took. I mean, I would ask the question, does Steve Bruce know his best side? And bearing in mind he's played 19 players in the last 2 games. In the last 2 games, he's selected 19 players. Does he know his best side? Does he know their best position? Because you've got to decide where Almiron's going to play. You've got to decide where Ritchie, when he's in, got to play. You've got to decide... etc., right away through the team. And he doesn't. Does he know his best tactics? A back 5, a back 4, 2 middle of the park, 2 up top, 1 up top, and his formation. No, he doesn't. We're at this stage of the season, and we don't know what path we're going to go down. I would ask you 2 boys, could you tell me 1 to 11, apart from the goalkeeper, what the side's going to be at Aston Villa?
I couldn't guess it, John. I tell you what, though, I was bemused, and I'd love to know what you think, Malcolm, as far as a centre forward's concerned. Callum Wilson. I mean, we know he needs to have a supply line. We started the game without a supply line. We played a 4-4-2 without any wingers. That's the way I saw it at the weekend. Yeah. When we did bring a winger on, we took one of our forwards off, and the forward we took off was the centre forward, who, okay, we know he hasn't done anything really other than score 1 goal since he returned to the club. However, we took the one man who could win the ball in the air and knock it down for his partner off and put a winger on. I mean, where was the sense in that?
There is no sense. There really is no sense. It suggests to me that there's not any real thought. It's, get one on and get one off, and without thinking tactically about it. I just wonder that one of the coaches goes with a pad and starts pointing and giving a little one-on-one team talk to the sub that's coming on, and I just think, what on earth are you actually saying to him? Because a winger, yeah, you want him to cross the ball, but you're taking a centre forward off. The winger will be saying, well, hang on, there's my target just walking off as I'm coming on. It's absolute madness. It really is. And there is, I just cannot make sense of it at all. And you can tell, watching the Arsenal game, that second Arsenal game, you could tell that the players had no belief whatsoever in what they were doing. None at all. And they looked like 10 strangers manoeuvring about a pitch. That there was the two central midfield players, you expect some communication. They played as if they were at war with each other. Shelvey just didn't want to know young Matty. Didn't want to know him at all. In the whole evening, I don't remember Shelvey actually passing to Joe Linton. And yet you watch a lot of the Premiership sides and the midfield players, they're all playing little interpasses as they manoeuvre themselves up the pitch. Not with Newcastle. No. And you know for a fact that Shelvey will let you down. He'll have the odd terrific game, but ultimately he will let you down. He did it at Swansea, and he shows that he can do it here an awful lot of the time.
Does he have any credibility left, John Askew's asking? I'll give that to you, John. Does Bruce have any credibility left, bearing in mind, that he's laid into the players now, he's put it at the players' door?
I don't know that he has. I've got to honestly say that. He's certainly got no credibility with the fans whatsoever. He's got plenty of credibility with Ashley, who just doesn't want to make a decision on this whatsoever, and won't make a decision on this at this stage. I mean, that is one of the depressing things, is that we know it will be any decision that is against the manager will be left so late, it'll be too late. It's frightening, isn't it, the situation with the players, because once you dump on the players by saying, right, when you say I'm going to do it my way, that indicates first and foremost he hasn't been doing it his way, and from the little things he's told us, he's been kowtowing, in his opinion, to the players by playing a 5 because Lascelles doesn't feel comfortable without one on each shoulder, at the back, two centre midfielders sitting. I mean, ultra nervous. Now, if he has let the tail wag the dog, that is bad enough. But if you then come out and slaughter the players publicly, throw them under a bus, if you like, by saying, in effect, they've had their way, now it's going to be my way, do you expect the response of the players to be so great that they come out with the sleeve rolled up over their shoulder blades and ready to run through a brick wall and die 1,000 deaths on behalf of the manager? You're not going to get that whatsoever. And by the way, I've got no wish to excuse the players in all this totally, because while Ashley carries the can a lot with the fans, and rightly so, and Bruce carries a lot with the fans, and rightly so, these players ought not to hide behind these two facts, because they should play for two reasons. their own pride, and for the people that pay their wages, the 50,000 fans who are normally in the ground, but will be in front of their television sets, watching them and desperate for things to happen. So please do not excuse them on block just because there's two people up there that deserve all the pelters that are coming their way, because the players must take some responsibility as well. They talk a very good fight, boys, Monday to Friday. You read the quotes Monday to Friday, and we must do better, and we're determined to do well, and that was not good enough, I admit it. It's easy to fight a good fight Monday to Friday. It's the weekend we need you to fight the good fight. And I'm looking at them and saying, I'll tell you what, boys, we know about the two at the top, but you lot aren't doing so clever either, are you?
No, definitely not. A question for each of you lads. When Steve Bruce does get the sack, hopefully soon, which manager would each of you like to be replaced? Look, we've talked about this on the show before. What I would like to say is 2 words to you, Malcolm. A man who's been linked with a job. Mark Hughes, new name in the in the arena. Anyhow, we've heard a lot about him, but Mark Hughes has been suggested and has come out and said that he's ready for a step back into top league management. You know, that's not the answer, is it?
No, I don't think so. But what it needs is somebody who can make an immediate impact. And I've never seen Mark Hughes make an immediate impact as a manager anywhere. Somebody, even if it's a short time appointment, just to ensure that relegation doesn't happen. And you know, Big Sam has often been the man for clubs in that position, and he's done it brilliantly. Whether he'll do it at West Brom, we'll have to wait and see. But somebody who can have that impact, and there's not many about at this time of the year. There really aren't very many about to choose from, but I think that anybody that we name is better than Steve Bruce, and will have a much more powerful impact.
Yeah, John. I mean, Mark Hughes. I think the only thing that I could tie to Mark Hughes is that the last time Man City got taken over, of course, by Sheikh Mansour, Mark Hughes was, of course, in the manager's seat. So maybe it's a good luck omen. Mark Hughes being in Newcastle's dugout as the Saudi takeover goes through.
And then the Saudi guys get rid of him exactly the same as has happened at Manchester City.
As long as they don't sign Robinho, I think he's past it now.
What worries me, Steve, is that we suddenly start thinking when clubs are under the cosh, let's go to the guys that used to do it. Let's go to the guys, so West Brom go and appoint Big Sam, and all of a sudden Mark Hughes is getting a mention. We'll be talking about Tony Pulis next, and that's a step into the past. Please, let's not go down this road. If we complain about managers who get on the managerial roundabout and always have a job because somebody else goes for them, that's what we're talking about here. When we talk about Sam, who got resurrected at West Brom, and by the way, he won't save them, they'll go down. And we talk about Tony Pulis, and we talk about Mark Hughes. Please do not let us go down that path, because if they are better than Steve Bruce, it's by what? 2%? Are we not going to try to? I tell you what, let's hang on, because Ashley hangs on, and we can get the guy up at Celtic when he gets the pedal. We can throw him in. Neil Lennon. We can get him. Please, let's not go down that route.
No, please, let's not. I've got to say then, lads, just while we're talking about that managerial position, where do we go from here? Because the games are coming thick and fast. We have, essentially Aston Villa, Leeds, Everton in our next 3 fixtures. If the worst case scenario is to happen, Malcolm, and we lose those 3 games, is Mike Ashley going to have to make a decision, or do you think it literally comes down to this takeover, in the background, making it difficult for him to get rid of anybody and then bring somebody else in? I mean, it's a very difficult situation.
Well, yes. Any situation like similar to this, it's a very difficult one indeed, and you need to handle it carefully and get it just right. Mike Ashley should have learnt when he appointed Alan Shearer that he did it way, way, way too late. It was way too late for Alan Shearer to make a ha'porth of difference. But what you have to remember is that Mike Ashley doesn't think football at all. He's not a football man. He's not a football thinker. He doesn't know how football actually works. Owning a football club is one thing, but knowing how it needs to operate is something entirely different. And that's why you employ managers and chief execs and what have you. But Mike Ashley should have learnt from that Shearer time. He appointed Alan Shearer, who I feel would have kept the club up had he been given somewhere in the region of at least 15 to 18 games. And that's why I say, if there's going to be a change, it must happen before this month is out. And give them the time to get in, to get to know everybody, get to know not just who they are, but what they are. And allow them the time to be able to make changes, to work with players, to create a new kind of bonding. And yes, it needs a real football man. Personally, I think that Eddie Howe is absolutely terrific at the way that he can get a side playing. And he's, I think, the only real available top man. What he did at Bournemouth was sensational, absolutely sensational. Okay, it all went wrong after about 3 or 4 or 5 seasons, but being at Bournemouth, it was always going to happen. With smaller clubs, they're sort of kicking way above their weight, way above. Newcastle, dear me, they are a heavyweight, and they should be proving themselves as a Premiership club. What they haven't got is a heavyweight manager.
That's the problem, John, though, isn't it? Eddie Howe, I mean, listen, I was at a Twitter conversation with somebody today saying you don't seem to be for Eddie Howe. Why, And I mean, it's not that I'm against Eddie Howe. I'm against Eddie Howe at this particular moment in time because, this is a precarious position Newcastle find themselves in where we're flirting once again with relegation, and we look as if we're that team that drops like the proverbial stone. There's always one that gets sucked in. At the moment, on current form, it looks as if it's going to be Newcastle. It might change, of course, but that's my concern. Bringing Eddie Howe into this, off the back of a relegation from the same division with a Bournemouth team that really was, a pretty good football team and should have stayed up. That has a lot of, we've got a couple of their players who've already suffered the relegation. It's a worry for me, John, if we appoint Eddie Howe. And people are saying to me, well, what's the answer? Well, you need somebody like Malcolm's just mentioned, like a Sam Allardyce, who specialises, it has to be said, in coming into a team which is in free fall and keeping them up. And that's, that it's difficult.
Careful, because we'll be back to Tony Pulis in a minute. We'll be appointing him as the great saviour that's capable.
Well, you've got Pulis, you had Kirbishley, Allardyce, Neil Warnock. There's 4 names off the top of my head who specialise in keeping people up, John.
We've had Allardyce once. You don't want him back, do you? I mean, luckily we can't get him back because he's in West Brom. But what two things? First of all, as Malcolm was pointing out with Alan Shearer, there wasn't the time. Ashley did it again, of course, guys, with when he brought Rafa Benitez in. He didn't have the time to keep Newcastle up at the end as well, but he stayed on in the Championship and brought her back. The difference as well on this occasion with Ashley, if he looks to get rid of the current manager, is that in the past, he had someone in the club called Chris Hughton who had the ability, the nous, the experience, and the calming influence to come into troubled waters, bed it all down as a taker, and take Newcastle on. And he did a terrific job at Newcastle when he brought them up and then had them very safe in the Premier League and beaten Sunderland by 5 when they decided to sack him. But there isn't a Chris Hughton behind the scenes at the moment either, because you wouldn't look to anybody on the current coaching staff and say he could take over and get us through the rest of the season and keep Newcastle up in the short term until we do something about it. There isn't a Chris Hughton. So it is a very, very difficult situation. There's people that would say that if you're looking for a short-term guy who would be willing to take it short-term and just have him for his immediate impact, which might keep us up, and then go for somebody else in the summer, that people might look at somebody like Nigel Pearson because of what he did at Leicester when he started getting the ball rolling at Leicester. That ended up, he bought Vardy, that ended up with the side that won the championship. Of course, he was well on his way to doing the same for Watford when the trigger-happy Watford guys, who are exactly the opposite of Ashley, they get rid on a whim, got rid of him there. And hasten to add, I'm not putting Nigel Pearson up as the long-term manager of Newcastle, because that would horrify me beyond what I'm going to, beyond what I could think. But what would you do for the last half of a season unless you had somebody of real quality that was out there? Pochettino is gone now, so it can't be him. The chance was there originally to have him. Who is out there waiting outside of Howe for to be a long-term appointment? And if it's short-term, it's only going to be somebody like Nigel Pearson or somebody else who might think of, Tony Pulis if you wanted, that would actually take it. It is a very, very, very difficult situation that we've allowed ourselves to get into, and yet it's a situation which, from day one, the fans always believed on Steve Bruce's appointment that it would come to this at some stage, and possibly sooner rather than later, which was obviously not looked into at all by Mike Ashley, who got on very well with a very amiable guy who comes over well and isn't going to give him any political problems. And therefore, we've got this massive problem. But if we stagger through this season and finish 4th bottom, Ashley will say this season, in his mind, has been a success. Sell the club, and he's out with 300 million, because to him, finishing 4th bottom is a success.
I understand that, John. But he's not going to be a happy man if he can't sell it, or can only sell it at half the value that it stands at now because of relegation.
But he's betting, Malcolm, because he knows no better, that the 7 8 points we've got now, and he's looking and thinking, I presume, Sheffield United are tailed off, maybe West Brom are tailed off. There's only one position that genuinely is there. What he needs to see to worry him, in my opinion, is suddenly seeing Fulham and Brighton collect a few more points in the next couple of games.
And both are playing well.
As long as the cushion remains what it is, he will sit and comfort himself that he can scrape through this season. And that's the risk we run, because we can get caught at the death big time. But the only thing that might accentuate the thing for me is not Newcastle continuing to lose or not win, because it's now 9 games, Malcolm, of which 7 have been lost. It's not a lot of draws. 7 of the 9's been lost. But if you look at the table and he sees the gap, Steve, between us and them, he just looks at that cushion. And if it always remains around the 7-8 point mark, he will sit tight and think we can survive and take that gamble that we can.
Yeah.
If Fulham or Brighton start closing the gap, then there might be a finger hovering over the button.
Yeah, you see, but the problem that will, with Ashley doing what you're saying, John, and we've seen him do it before, so there's every likelihood he's going to do it this season. The problem is that what he's not realizing is that that if the standard keeps further dropping and dropping, that players, they become so disinterested that they get into bad moods. And so if all of a sudden you get, like Fulham and Brighton, they suddenly start putting a few points into the bag, and you've got to turn it around here at Newcastle, and the players just aren't up for it because they've been on a downer for weeks running into months, and they were on a serious downer against Arsenal. My word, it was absolutely shocking. I think that is the worst that I have ever seen from any Newcastle side in the decades that I've been watching. The absolute worst.
Wow.
And there was no spirit at all. Did you once see a player just have a point at somebody else and just have a bit of a banter or have a bit of a rough? It just wasn't happening. Players, they were like that.
Yeah.
And of course, what further is happening, that on the sidelines, you're getting exactly the same from Steve Bruce. He just doesn't say anything. He's not getting anything onto the pitch at all. And I think it's because he really doesn't know what to do or what to say. And so the whole thing on the pitch is absolutely dying. And you can't turn it round and bring it back up.
No.
Or rather, Steve Bruce will not be able to do that. And if you have a look at his record, he's managed an awful lot of clubs. He doesn't stay anywhere for longer than 2 years. And he's already been here 18 months. And so we're getting that final 6 months of a downward spiral. And then he'll be sacked. Because that's what happens with Steve Bruce over his managerial career.
Yeah, it looks to me as if he was brought in as a stopgap. They were hoping this takeover would go through. Couldn't have envisaged it was going to drag on this long, and now it's put Mike Ashley in a difficult position. A difficult position. Look, this question gets asked a lot, lads, and we never really tackle it. Your best starting 11, I suppose, and it's probably because we had a little run of form, and then now we've hit this horrendous run. I suppose, what 11 would you like to put out against Aston Villa? I mean, I'll start with you, John, because Malcolm's just had a say there. Give Malcolm a little bit of time to think. What formation would you go for, John? What would you say would be our strongest, and what players would you play? Let's start with your goalkeeper. Who would you play in goal?
I would keep Darlow in, but I'm not concerned about either of the two keepers playing because they're both quality. That is the one position where I think you can say if it was Dubravka, that's fine. If it's Darlow, that's fine. But I don't think at this stage you can drop Darlow after what he's done this season without killing the boy. So I would just go with Darlow. I would have to go 4-4-1-1 because I don't want 5 at the back because we're wasting a player higher up the pitch. we don't know exactly who's going to be fit for this game, apart from the fact that we won't have our potentially best player, which is San Maximum. And I say best only because he is capable of doing the unusual, and that is what turns games. The predictable doesn't turn football matches because people are ready for it. It's predictable. It's the unusual. It's the pace. It's Malcolm suddenly running off 100 miles an hour off the centre half who doesn't know where the hell he is. It is the unusual touch, the exceptional touch. And that is something on a good day Sam Maximin can do. On another day, he'll be a moody player and won't do it because things aren't going well, or he's not getting on with the coach, or he's got out the wrong side of the bed, or whatever. He can be moody, but he can do something that's different. Unfortunately, we can't play him at Aston Villa because we know he's nowhere near fit. I mean, I would want to go with Manquillo at right back, and whether he can last 90 minutes because he hasn't taken part since having COVID for quite a while. But I'm not a DeAndre Yedlin fan because I don't think he can defend whatsoever. And I'm certainly not a Kraft fan, who I was decimated to find out may not be getting transferred. He was willing to get transferred to Turkey or whatever, but may not because Steve Bruce brought him back, so he thinks he might have a future here. Well, no, he hasn't. So, I mean, I would prefer Manquillo. I would have to go at left back with Dummett because I think at the moment Lewis is taking in water, has a lot to learn, and he's not going to learn it by being in a side where he'll get dumped in it position-wise by other players, and his skills as a defender are very limited. I think Ritchie, it's too far back. A 4 doesn't suit Ritchie. A 5 suits him more because he can have cover from the left side at centre half. So I would go with Dummett there, and me two centre, Fernandez and Clark, if Fernandez was fit, would be me two centre halves. But in a lot of cases, these guys aren't good enough for Newcastle United, but they're going to have to be on Saturday. Centre midfield, goodness gracious, it's easier to know who you wouldn't go with, which would be Shelby and Sean Longstaff. So I think I would probably go with Hayden and Matty Longstaff. Out wide, I would probably go, I know who I wouldn't go with, which is Joe Linton. And I probably would go with Matt Ritchie on the left, Matt Ritchie one side out wide for his crossing ability, and on the other side maybe Murphy if Almiron was playing as a 10 behind Wilson, or if we could get in with Gale going with Wilson in it too, then you would still put Almiron in the side in what is a wide position, although he doesn't play wide naturally and he's not a crosser of the ball. But that would be making the best of a patchwork quilt, which is what we're going to have to do at this moment. But we so often play players out of position. We'll play Ritchie, who is best up the field. We'll play him as at left back. We'll play Almiron in any position whatsoever, just to shoehorn him into the team or make him on the subs bench. I mean, centre midfield can be anybody. And Jeff Hendrick plays out wide, plays centre. We play anybody in any position whatsoever. We'll play Jacob Murphy's a right back at one situation. We've got to play players in their best positions and not just say we want these guys in the team, so play them anyway, so that they are in the starting 11. And also, I think that Steve Bruce has got to decide when he sits by himself at night what his best 11 is, put it out and stay with it. Don't shuffle the cards and have 6 changes every match where players can't get used to who their partner is, what's happening. Pick your best side, and injury permitting, stay with that side and get them in the dressing room and say, you are going to be the boys to get us out of this trouble. I'm going to put my faith in you. Now you put your faith in me, and go as much as possible with the same side regularly. Because using 19 players in the last 2 matches Newcastle United have played is an absolute nonsense.
Yeah, it is. A big shout out to our sponsors, the world's first alcohol-free distillery, the Old Coach House Distillery. We can find them at their website, oldcoachhousedistillery.co.uk. Visit their website, enter the code OCHD to claim your introductory 10% discount and get the most out of your mindful dry January. And Ginesque is the bottle you can see on there, well worth a try. And also a big shout out to John at Jab, who designs the flyers, and qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wolves and Newcastle, who make our t-shirts as well, which you can buy at newcastlelegends.com. Don't forget as well, we do our Malcolm MacDonald mugs and t-shirts, and Malcolm's got his t-shirt there. He's got it. Well done, Mal. He's got it there. So they are modelled by Malcolm MacDonald. Get yourself to newcastlelegends.com, get yourself onto the tickets link, and you can buy something there. And if you enjoy the channel, we've had some interesting feedback today. Jeff Allen, of course, well-known player from back in the 60s, Fairs Cup days. I think John was speaking to him this week. He's a regular fan, tunes in, so hello to him. Peter Beardsley watches on a regular basis as well, so good evening to Peter. Lots of other people as well, so big thanks to everybody who tunes in. If you enjoy it, please subscribe. Just click this little emblem down on the right hand side. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and just hit the like button and hit the share button and comment as well if you want to. Got plenty of shows lined up, a couple of really good ones, of course. We've got the Three Amigos tomorrow night. That will be 5:30 till 7:30, 2 hours, of course, with me, Steve Hasty, and Neil Mitchell. And then on Sunday, I've got Mick Lowes. Mick, of course, you will remember, the man who was the voice of Newcastle United for many, many years in the commentary box with John Anderson. Mick's going to come on and give us his views on what's going on at Newcastle United. And Mick Lowes is exactly the same as me, John, and Malcolm. There's no punches pulled. He gives it straight and shoots it straight from the hip. So I'm expecting a fairly forthright opinion on Sunday afternoon. Malcolm, give us your 1 to 11 and your formation then.
Well, I've been thinking as John has been speaking, and there are there are some very genuine players at Newcastle. John mentioned 3 or 4. Kieran Clark is one. I think the world of Matt Ritchie, but he's got to be played in position, and then he's got to have people playing alongside. And what I can't understand is why on earth is Dwight Gale just completely cast aside? The last time he played, he scored. And then he's relegated to the bench. Excuse me. And slowly, he moves along the bench until he's outside of the squad. I just find that utterly bizarre. I really do. When this is a side that has scored 1 goal in its past, 11 games? And there's a proven goal scorer, and he's being booted out of the squad, having scored a goal in his last game. I just find it absolute sheer madness. I really do. They need to be working in training to find what the right partnership is. Do they play Andy Carroll? Who is the best at getting the best that they can out of Andy Carroll? Find the forward line that works. A mid-4, yes, you must have width. If you're going to play a big fella in Andy Carroll, for example, you've got to be getting crosses in. So we need people who can cross. Certainly Matt Ritchie on the left-hand side. Oh dear, what's his name? The lad who, he's just recently started getting into the side. He plays on the right-hand side. His name's escaped me for the moment.
Fullback or winger?
No. He's a right-sided midfield player, right winger.
Murphy.
Murphy.
Is it Murphy? Sorry. Yes,
Murphy.
thanks, John. His name just escaped me. Murphy, he will get crosses in. Whether or not he's actually good enough to play at this level generally over a 90-minute period, I'm really not sure. But he will give you better than what's being offered at the moment. In the centre of the park, Shelby is just driving me crazy. He's got all the ability under the sun. But if he doesn't want to use it, he will just go and play the most selfish 90 minutes. He'll make himself look good and he'll make everybody else look poor. And that's not playing for the team, for the club, for the guys around you. And so Shelby is the kind of player who will get you relegated. And so Hayden, he's a genuine lad, but I really don't think that he's a player of the level that's required in the Premier League. And so and you can't play two youngsters, the Longstaff brothers. You could maybe do that, say in Division 1, but you can't do it. You can't try that on a week by week program in the Premiership. It's just not on. And so what I'm doing is I think I'm finding massive gaps in the squad. I would agree with you about Manquillo, John. Certainly. I think Clark has got to be in there. Personally, at left back, I would put Dummett. Now, Dummett, the last couple of games, he's looked absolutely shocking. And I think it's just purely and simply that he's so unsure of what's actually going on and what he's required to do. But he is the best defender in the club. So that's what we need, good defenders. So get him in. And alongside Clark, yes, I would play Fernandes. I think he's a terrific character. He's one of the very few players in the last few weeks who has impressed at times. But the central midfield is a major problem. This is January. The transfer market is in action. But I can't see the owner being interested in trying to resolve that problem. But the central midfield it's absolutely crucial. It really is. It's the screen in front of the back four, and they're the playmakers for width and for knocking the forwards into the box. And we haven't got players doing that. We just haven't got anybody doing it. I thought Matty Longstaff, I thought he was trying his socks off, absolutely trying his socks off against Arsenal, and nobody was responding to him. Nobody at all. And that tells me there is a massive problem in the dressing room. I have personally witnessed it myself when I was at Fulham. And I know how senior players, how they can just completely shut somebody out of a game. And it happened to me, and it happened to about 4 or 5 other lads at Fulham. And so I recognise it when it happens. And I thought that they were doing it to Matty. And yet he kept going. He really tried. Well done, him. I can't come up with an 11 because I just don't think there's 11 real triers who are good enough to play in the Premiership. To be honest.
Wow.
And
That's
also,
depressing.
can I just carry on one? There is one other thing. I would like to know who it is who has been bringing all of these players in over the past couple of years. 40 million for a player who hasn't got a clue. Not a clue. And why is he still in the side? Get him out, for heaven's sake. You can see that it's doing other players' heads in, because I watched him very carefully against Leicester. He lost possession in every three times he got the ball, he lost it twice. Twice. That if I had been playing to those kind of figures when I was 16, playing in the Southern League for Tunbridge, Harry Haslam would have kicked me out. That's absolutely shocking stats. And in that game, he lost possession twice in every three times he got the ball. And so, and players around him, they see this happening, and all it means for them is that they just got to work all the harder because they've got somebody who can't play, who can't hold on to the ball, can't hold possession. And so sooner or later they say, I can't be doing this anymore. And that's what we're witnessing now. And that's the slippery slope, when players don't believe in each other, yet they're in the same team. And we saw against Arsenal a complete collapse of any team spirit whatsoever. There was none. They were literally 10 strangers on that pitch. And so I would say to Mike Ashley right now, if I was Steve Bruce, I've got a problem in the centre of midfield and need to get people in, even if it's just guys on loan. But Steve Bruce should be saying to the owner, if you really intend to sell this and get your money, we need to stay in the Premiership. Otherwise, you've lost your deal. And so I need a few quid, even if it's to bring the right players in on loan. And loans they're relatively expensive these days, to be honest, for what they are. But for what Mike Ashley has at stake, it's a drop in the ocean for him, an absolute drop in the ocean. And what also happens is that a couple of new faces go into the dressing room and woof, it sparks off everybody. They all want to know the new player. They want to see him in training. They want to be impressed by him. And if that happens, then everybody else starts to go up, up and up in their form. And so a couple of new faces would be absolutely ideal right now. Leave it as it is.
We'll get a couple of new faces, Malcolm, but it'll be on the second last day of the transfer window, and they will be on loan. And okay, if they were on loan and they save us, absolutely brilliant. But I have not a lot of faith in the loan system, as I have not in the recruitment system. When you think of the 3 players we got on loan in January of last year, for me, made no impression on the team whatsoever. We've got to do better than that. We're not going to buy anybody. That's the biggest certainty of all time, is that we will not buy anybody in this transfer window. We will, right at the death, when the panic's on and we're still in a growing relegation situation, we'll scramble a couple through the door on loan. They've got to create more than the 3 did a year ago, because for me, all 3 give us next to nothing.
Sure, but why doesn't Steve Bruce just pick the phone up? He's an ex-Manchester United player. Talk to Ollie Solskjaer. Manchester United have got a massive amount of players. Some of them outside of their first team squad. Have a chat with Solskjaer and say, I need a couple of really good, solid, imaginative central midfield players. Who would you suggest? And then there will be somebody there. And give it a chance.
You know who it'll be. He'll give us Michael Carrick, which I would have been well up for in his day. My God, I would. But he'll give us Mike. And then if we don't take him, he'll say, well, the only player we've got available that I'll let you have, so you get some extras, Henderson, when the only position we've got 2 good players for is goalkeeper. So, and by the way, the only thing that might be wrong there, Malcolm, is that when then Ollie goes to see the guy and says, I'm sending you up to Newcastle so that he can spend the next 6 months in a relegation fight and you'll be picked and coached by Steve Bruce. Do you think the guy's going to be catching an aeroplane up to Newcastle Airport anytime soon?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think we might have just lost Malcolm at the death. So anyone who said that he's going to last a full show was wrong. We've lost him with 2 minutes to spare. He's gone into pause mode. He's let the dogs out. But good to have Malcolm on as always. It just leaves us to finish off and predict the game at the weekend. Of course, we'll play Aston Villa this coming Saturday. It's live on Sky Sports, 8 o'clock, and it's a big game. Of course, we will be doing Match Day Live at 7:30, talking you through the teams. A little bit of team news, early team news, I suppose. Availability of Fabian Schär, Federico Fernandez, Dwight Gale is still awaited. The trio, of course, were unavailable for the trip to Arsenal. As we've already mentioned on the show, ASM is back in full training, but that means nothing really. There's no guarantee that he's going to feature in this game. So again, we'll have to wait for Steve Bruce's press conference to announce that. For Aston Villa, John McGinn is suspended. Courtney House is injured and Trezeguet is doubtful. So Dean Smith, the manager, of course, was red carded in last night's game at Man City, where of course they lost 2-0. So he will be spending his time, I would imagine, in the stands. The referee is Simon Hooper. He's the man who, of course, was refereeing when we got beat off Leeds 5-2, and the VAR referee is Paul Tierney. It is live on Sky Sports at 8 o'clock. John, what's your prediction for that game, mate?
Oh dear. I mean, I don't know if you watched, Steve, the game with Man City. There was a feeling that there could be ring rusty Villa, because they've just had 2 days training after missing 2 Premier League games, coronavirus, and the game before that they had to put out their under-18s in the cup against Liverpool because they had no senior players available with coronavirus. So they've been hit more than we have by the current pandemic. But I thought they played well for long periods against City and were very unlucky. The first goal was the guy offside in the build-up or not. The penalty, what on earth he was doing in the ball that was going wide. In any case, they played well on occasions. And, you know, my first feeling, Steve, is that, by Jove, isn't Steve Bruce going to be relieved that there isn't a crowd inside Villa Park? Because had there been, all the Aston Villa fans, remembering when Steve Bruce was manager down there, would be goading him and singing from the kickoff, "You're going to be sacked in the morning." And the Newcastle United fans, who aren't very keen on the Villa fans, would nonetheless be applauding them and saying, "You're right," or "You ought to be right." So must be a huge relief for Brucey that there's no fans in there. I mean, they have done terrific this season. Last season, they only stayed up on the last day of the season, but they spent money yet again in the transfer market, and they've been in no danger whatsoever. They beat Liverpool, you've got to remember, Steve, 7-2 this season. And let us not forget, the Van Dijk was in the side then. We're saying how Liverpool are missing him now. The centre half, he was in the side that Villa scored 7 goals against. Newcastle United might not score 7 goals in the rest of the season, never mind in one game. So there is a difference. You've got to keep saying that at some stage Newcastle United's run has got to end on the law of averages. The way they're playing at the moment, I can't see that coming, or I can't see what's coming. The Leeds have fallen off the perch. No goals scored in the last 3 games, and they score for fun. We've got them on Tuesday night. I've got to say that I think we'll lose down there. We haven't scored more than 1 goal in 12 hours of football, so I can't see us scoring again. And I'm going to go for 2-0, and Newcastle will lose 2-0. It doesn't please me one iota. I am yearning to be wrong, but I cannot at the moment see where that's going to come. Possibly the better chance is Leeds in the free fall they are going to be in. Pity we haven't got Wolves. They're playing like us at the moment since their centre forward was injured. They are the other team, Steve, that might be in free fall like us. I think Aston Villa, having had a long layoff, having done well, and having felt aggrieved about what happened against Manchester City, will be thirsting for us. And Barkley and Grealish in the centre of midfield will dominate our centre midfield guys. And that's where it happens, in the centre of the field. So I'm afraid I'm going to be predictable. I think Newcastle are predictable, and sadly, I think we'll lose.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm with you, John. I'll keep my prediction till match day live. I am just going to leave you with Stu's comment. The gloves are off, John, but unfortunately the dunce's hat is still firmly on. I think that sums it up.
I like that one, big man.
John, as always, great to have you and Malcolm on, and I look forward to seeing you next week when hopefully we're smiling a little bit. It would be nice. I know we can always keep our spirits up, but we need some points in the bag to make us truly happy. John, have a good week, mate. I'll speak to you then.
God bless you. Thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone that's been watching. God bless.
Take care. Thanks everybody for watching. See you tomorrow night with the Three Amigos at 5:30.